You're listening to Now I've Heard Everything. Interviews from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s with voices from the past.
Anyone out there listening who has children knows that when a child loves a book, you're in for a reading at least 40 or 50 times of that book to that child. And don't try to skip a page because they won't let you.
Children's book author Tomie dePaola today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. Well, if you've had young children in your house any time in the last 50 years, or perhaps you were the young child, then you know the name Tomie dePaola. He turned a childhood fascination with drawing into a lucrative career that spanned decades and turned out over 260 children's books. One of my interviews with Tomie came a few years ago, right around this time of year, as we talked about his book, Jingle the Christmas Clown. And he had some fascinating insights on what it takes to create an engaging children's book. So here now, from 1992, Tomie dePaola.
My boss looked at my schedule to see who I had coming in this week, and he didn't realize it was a children's book. He said, Jingle the Christmas Clown. Your name is right there next to all the political books that I've got, and he said, Jingle the Christmas Clown. And I said, Frank, you obviously don't have kids. Because anybody who has kids and they recognize your name, they're going to say, yes, another new one. All right.
Right. It's the new one. Right.
We look so forward to each of your new books.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Every fall there's at least one new one. And I get sent out across the country, just like I'm doing now, peddling it around. And Jingle actually has been sort of on the drawing board. It was on the drawing board for about a year and a half. It was a long project because I did a little bit different technique with the art. I did sort of layered paintings, and so it took a little longer. And I also spent a lot longer on the manuscript because it kept on sort of growing by itself and changing and moving around, and things got taken out. And it started out as a kind of a project with maybe a little bit more commercial than a good Christmas picture book. And I realized once we got going on it that it had much more depth than I was giving Jingle when he first appeared in my mind. So there it is, right out there now.
To the totally uninitiated, a children's book on its face seems to be should be one of the simplest things to do.
Right.
You draw a few pictures, you put a few little simple
words, right?
And you throw a cover on it, and you put it in the bookstore, and you make $1 million, right?
Right. Wrong. Wrong. The $1 million part is especially wrong. No, it's interesting, isn't it? That I get it all the time. My wife has a friend who is interested in doing nice little books. But I had a young friend who was doing a book for me. I have my own imprint as well at Putnam's called Whitebird Books, which is an imprint on ethnic folktale. And one of the artists and authors that was working with me, she was having a hard time with her text. And I was talking to her on the phone, and I suddenly had this amazing, I was sort of went into another dimension, and I explained to her what a good children's text, what it really is. You start off like a stew, or it's like making stock. You put everything in the pot, all the peelings, all the bones, all the stuff, and you bring it to a boil, and then all this scum comes up to the surface, and you have to very carefully take all that scum and discard it. And then you turn the heat down and you let it simmer and simmer and simmer. And the longer you simmer it, the stronger the flavor. Then you strain it. And then if you want it to be crystal clear stock, you then have to add, egg whites and bring it up again, and then just take the essence off. And that's what a really good story for young people really is. It takes all that energy to reduce your ideas so that you get down to the very strong basic idea. And the same thing for me with the art. I've spent my life, more or less, I don't like to compare myself with Matisse, but I do the same thing that Matisse did. I'm constantly reducing and trying to find the simple, common line and form. And I guess I do that on purpose, and because I think that children, at least the children I know, recognize that what I'm doing right away. The pictures are easy to read, And hopefully the stories are too.
What is the difference, though, between distilling a story down to its basic elements and making it making it the best you can? What's the difference between that, though, and what happens to so many children's books that get dumbed down to the lowest common denominator?
Oh yeah, well, I think that's the difference in the publisher that you deal with. To be perfectly honest, I mean, I've Putnam's has been my publisher, exclusively been my publisher for the last 8 years. My editor and I have worked together for 30 years now, almost 30 years. It's 29. She keeps on reminding me. She said she liked it better when it was only 25 years. But Margaret Frith is my editor and also the president of Putnam's Children's Books. And Margaret is one of those wonderful editors that she really edits, and I let her edit, and I work with her. We argue sometimes, but there are these books that they have a word list, but that's like the old textbooks. That's like the old books I grew up learning how to read with in school, which I rebelled against, the Dick and Jane books, which were, stupid. In fact, I think that's why a lot of children had problems with reading, is that the textbooks in the classroom the stories weren't interesting. And the people who are using trade books, like a good children's book that you buy in a bookstore, in their classrooms, the children are learning how to read faster, and they're learning how to read better because there's interest there. Just because a book is simple doesn't mean it's thin. It can have very, very deep, complicated stories and character. It's the same thing with a novel. I loved it once when I met a young adult novelist, and we were at a conference, and she was saying to me, "I don't know how you people do children's books, picture books, because they're 32 pages, minimum words. I don't. In fact, one of my books, The Knight and the Dragon, only has about 30 words to it, and it is a case with a picture book that one picture can be worth 1,000 words." And she said, because it's so difficult even to write a young adult novel, and to get that simplicity of language but yet the complicatedness of plot and character into it's a real tough process, and it is not as easy as it looks at all. And people that start to do books find that out very, very quickly.
I hope people aren't still asking you, when are you going to do a serious book?
No one's ever asked me that, because I deck them. But that there is that famous story that Maurice Sendak has told in public, that when he got the Caldecott, his father said, "Oh, maybe now they'll let you write real books," which is pretty devastating.
But children are very, very good, and they're very discerning. They can read between the lines.
Yes,
they
can.
know the story, even though they may not know all the words that you left out and all the stock that you scummed and everything like that.
But all the flavors there.
The flavors there, because they know that they're very good.
See, Bill, I always say, I tell myself constantly, and I also tell young people who are, call me or write me or whatever and ask me about, how do I get started? I say, well, okay, number one, read The Emperor's New Clothes. And if you get, I don't tell them why I want them to read it, but then if they call me and we talk about it, why I want them to read it is because in that story by Hans Christian Andersen, it's the child that says, "But Daddy, the Emperor is naked." Everyone else is saying, "Oh, doesn't he look wonderful? Look at, isn't that gold brocade, train gorgeous?" And the little kid says, "But he's naked. He's not wearing any clothes." And that's what children will do. If the book isn't any good, they don't care how much hype it's given. It will not be one of their favorites. And I think anyone out there listening who has children knows that when a child loves a book, you're in for a reading at least 40 or 50 times of that book to that child. And don't try to skip a page, because they won't let you. Children are the most devoted fans there are in the world.
At some level, then, must you make a children's book palatable to adults as well, so that they don't get sick of it after the 40th reading?
I don't know. I don't think too much about that, but I think that's maybe where a little bit of the sophistication in the art, or a good story. Again, I think a good story. Adults are suckers for good stories too.
True. Without giving away too much of the plot, and certainly without giving away the ending. What is the story of Jingle about?
Well, Jingle is a young clown, and he's too young to perform. and he's a member of Il Circo Piccolo, the little circus, which is a little Italian circus that goes around and through the hill towns of Italy. And every Christmas they play, the Christmas season, they play in the big city. It's a big venue for them. But on Christmas Eve, they usually play at a little village that they've stopped on every Christmas. And Jingle's job is to take care of all the baby animals, the little baby elephant, the monkeys, the dogs, and the lion and the tiger and the donkey and the pony. And when they get to the little village, it's desolate. All the young people, it's been a hard year. It's been a very hard year for the villagers. A summer too hot or spring too wet. And all the young people and the families have left to go to the big city or someplace else for work. And the only people left in the village are the vecchietti, the old people, the old-timers. And they don't have enough money to have the circus. So it's decided that the circus will move on and try to get to the big city to get an extra performance in for Christmas Eve. But the baby animals are too tired. So Jingle and the baby animals are left behind, and they'll come back and get them on Christmas Day. And Jingle, because he is a wonderful young man, little boy, and like most young children, he has a big heart. He and the baby animals decide to put on a circus for all the old people, and a free circus at that. And that's the story. And a wonderful thing happens. I think a wonderful thing happens.
Does a story like this come to you as first of all a storyline, or first of all as visual images?
First of all, a storyline. When I got the idea for Jingle, I had to. It's interesting, Bill, because I did have to sort of get him down on paper. I had to see what he was going to look like. And I was struggling with his face, and I remembered that when I was about 7 years old, I had a clown marionette. And so I remembered what that clown marionette looked like, and I made Jingle's face look like that. But he's a sort of a traditional 19th century, in a traditional sort of Italian clown costume, sort of like a little Pierrot.
He doesn't have those flashing electronic blinking
No,
lights.
he doesn't.
So.
No, he doesn't. They didn't have electricity in those days. It's another time, too. It's an earlier time.
But is it more difficult these days to capture a child's imagination when you are competing with Nintendo and Sega, Genesis?
No. I'm not saying that those aren't big forces in the entertainment field for children, but I still think that young children, especially the picture book age group, which is like from 3 to 8 or 3 to 9 now. I guess it keeps on expanding on both ends. It used to be 5 to 7, then it went to 4 to 7. 5, anyway, now maybe next year it'll be 3 to 27, 28, hopefully.
Well, given the sad state of our college graduates,
yeah, they might be able to manage the text in Jingle if they're in college. Yeah, but I think that I think anyway, and especially if sales figures are any indication, and I guess we do have to look at those. The picture book is alive and well in the United States, and I give a lot of credit to teachers who are using this new whole language approach to reading, and to young parents who are realizing that reading aloud is an important activity. And that once children fall in love with books, they'll love them for the rest of their lives. And I think that books always have a special place. A book is a different thing than a video game. Thank goodness.
That's true. And there was always something about granted you could take video games anywhere now, I suppose,
right.
too, with the Walkman or things like that. But there's something about being able to take a book under the covers with you at night with a flashlight.
Right, yeah.
And there's just something kind of...
Or sit in a corner on a rainy day and look out the window and read.
And it's just, you almost feel kind of sneaky at times because, you're reading a book. And while you're sitting there physically in one place, your
imagination's
mind
going
is a million miles away.
Right.
And you're sitting there watching the circus.
Yep. Hopefully.
Oh,
right. Yeah.
Does that make you draw the pictures differently than you would if it was just, a contract says I got to crank out another book this fall, so...
No, there are moments when I feel I'm doing that because it's like, deadline. Why didn't I work yesterday? I have to be up all night. No, I think that what happens is that I've been doing books for almost 30 years now, and actually, it actually gets harder. It's harder now. I think you know more. what can happen. But see, I guess without trying to sound too Pollyanna-ish I really, when I start a project, I always sort of do a little thinking and saying, okay, this is for all those young people out there. And I really admire young people. I think they have a tough world ahead of them, and I like to give them as much love and support and joy in their lives as I can, especially when they're, real young, 4, 5, 6 years old. So I'm always keeping those young people in my mind, not that I'm drawing down to them, because then I have my pride and my actually my duty as an artist, and especially my duty as a well-known person in the field, to do good work for my audience. I mean, there is that responsibility, that you must do your best, especially for young people. At least I feel that.
Tomie dePaola died in 2020. He was 85. Now, you can get a copy of Jingle the Christmas Clown by Tomie dePaola by tapping on the link in our show notes or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. While you're at heardeverything.com, don't miss my 2003 interview with Stan and Jan Berenstain. Yes, the Berenstain Bears creators.
Kid once said, "Why did you do bears?" And we said, "Well, they sort of stand up and they dress them up in clothes and in circus." He said, "Well, why didn't you do monkeys?" And I said, "They're too much like people."
It's fun to draw bears, too. They stand up and they can be very human looking, at least when we draw them.
And my 2007 interview with Burke Breathed.
I couldn't quite leave all the controversy of my cartooning days behind. I thought if I went into children's books, I wouldn't be running on that ragged edge. And sure enough, it's like I can't avoid it. I've always got to be pushing the envelope a bit.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, the history of rock and roll, as told by not only a guy who had a front row seat, but he helped shape many of those careers. My 2009 conversation with famed disc jockey Cousin Brucey.
This is the Cousin Brucey rock and roll cycle. Life happens. The poets laud it. The journalists report it. The artists record it. Cousin Brucey exports it.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.